All right, welcome. Today, just profiling Dandasana, or staff pose. It's a seemingly easy posture, but as we kind of dig into it a little bit, we discover that it's more challenging, or at the very least requires more effort than what seems to be on the surface. All right, here we go. So the variables that need be considered is your very own architecture, and that is typically any tightness that you might have in the hamstrings. We might be able to use something like a block if you have really tight hamstrings. And how do we determine that? So if you're sitting with your legs straight and you feel a very strong pull backwards, as if it's really effortful to keep yourself upright. And I'm not saying mild effort. I have mild effort in keeping myself upright. Others who are incredibly flexible will find this posture to be incredibly easy. And we'll work on ways to make it more challenging for them. But if you have very tight hamstrings and you go to extend the legs, right, notice if you bend your knees, you might be able to sit up a little bit taller. Right? So you might be here with bent knees, but as you straighten, right, you might see this dynamic happen. Right? Everything's kind of like those hinges are working in concert with one another. So the tighter the hamstrings, the more you bend your knees, the more upright you can be. We can also eliminate some of that by sitting ourselves up onto a block. I prefer, not to use the block if we don't have to, but instead keeping the knees bent. All right, so wherever you might be, right, if you are, again, a little bit on the tighter side, you might have those knees bent, right? And if you're, somewhere like myself, somewhere in the middle there, straight legs, although challenging to keep ourselves, the spine upright, right, the spine perpendicular to the femur bones. On the other hand, if you have if you have great ease in Dandasana, with great flexibility, and your overall architecture allows for minimal effort in the pose, let's explore some ways in which you might be able to find a little bit more effort. We'll start with those feet. Take a tiny bend in the knees. Press straight down, vertically into your mat with your heels. This is going to cause some engagement back of the knees and into those hamstrings. And, with those legs mostly straight, the hamstrings somewhat at length, all the while placing some pressure down onto those heels with that light engagement of the hamstrings that will help build more structure and integrity in the hamstrings. All right. So, we're sitting up tall. Let's start at our feet. If I'm just going to be lazy, one of the things that happens is this. Right? We end up turning the pinky toes forward. That's what I believe is called inversion. Although I get the two mixed up all the time, inversion and eversion. All right, so what we want to do is evert, working the pinky toe edges of the feet backwards, which again might be inversion. Okay, so I have my big toe mounds touching with my heels just slightly apart. And what that's going to do is help encourage some internal rotation of the hips, or at the very least prevent them from moving what they naturally want to do, and that is towards an external rotation. Here, I've got no effort, right, from my hip joint down to my feet. As I bring my legs together, immediately I have quite a bit of effort. The gluteus medius fire off to find that internal rotation, as well as the adductors. I want you to explore, this movement of the pinky toe edges of the feet back. As you squeeze the legs towards one another, feel how the role that the adductors play in getting those feet just right. All right, so again, knees bent or straight or somewhere in between. Now the pelvis, right, we're moving towards an anterior tilt here. That is the front of the pelvis, the top of the pelvis, moving forward into the body. I'm not going into a forward fold just yet. I'm just trying to position my body upright, shoulders stacked over hips. Now, from this position, I'm trying to neutralize my spine a little bit Right? So those of you, again, that are a little bit more flexible, you might not have to articulate this tilt in the pelvis so much. As a matter of fact, it might be even more beneficial for you to find some like kind of a very intentional engagement in the belly to lift the front of the pelvis up, which oftentimes would promote a posterior tilt to the pelvis, which is counter to what we're looking for. But with that little bit of effort, can again start to build a better structure, more integrity, lots more strength in your Dandasana. Okay, so from here I am going to hollow my belly. Right? I am going to engage those belly muscles, slightly different dynamic than I was just describing for those who are more flexible. Because I got my legs squeezing together, working the pinky toe edges back, stacking shoulders over hips. I hollow out the belly, and at the same time I press the spine forward to keep that somewhat perpendicular angle, pelvis, right? The iliac crest, the top of the pelvis, sit bones, vertical to one another from the hip joint down to the knee joint, perpendicular to that pelvis. All right. So from here, again, navel back, Uddiyana Bandha, spine forward. Chest rising, long spine, Jalandhara Bandha, chin down, chest up. From here, we got to make sure we're relaxing the shoulders, draw the shoulder blades back, retract, and down, depress. Now let's look at the arms for a moment. I've got incredibly long arms. You'll notice I have a little bend in my elbows. For some of you, you'll notice that your hands don't even touch the mat. Right? That's just fine. But I do want you to have very cool energy in those hands. Yeah, you can place blocks underneath the hands or something like that. I prefer fingertips, right, if those fingertips will reach. All right? Just something to help kind of ground down the hands. Also, something for us to not necessarily press down, right? We're not trying to lift the body up necessarily, but I do want to press very gently into the mat, all the while feel like I'm scrubbing my hands back, whether on fingertips or on palms, in effort to work those shoulders and the shoulder blades to help open up the chest. So the movement of the breath, so important, right? Every pose, right, is an asana. Every asana has the potential to be a seal, a mudra. We find that seal, no doubt, through the work of the bandhas, this physical engagement, this alignment I just described, but also turning the mind inward, looking towards prana, right, the movement of energy in your body as you're breathing in the pose. Right? Learn to kind of move that prana out through the feet in front of you, up through the crown of your head, down through the hands. Almost kind of sense a pulsation, a movement in and out with each inhale and exhale respectively. Right? That's what's really going to be some of the more important aspects of our yoga practice. Right? This Yoda would say crude matter. We're not made up of this crude matter. Right? We're luminous beings are we, as he would say. That luminosity comes through the lightness we might encounter or experience during the unification of breath, body, and calmness in the mind. Well, I do hope you enjoyed this little profile of Dandasana staff pose. Keep up your practice and stay well. Peace.